Hey guys, first and foremost, thank you very much for doing the right thing today and this weekend while we are out of school. So I'm a little annoyed. I'll just be honest with you, and it's not your fault. I recorded a really great video. I did 37 minutes of a really great video for you, and I drew a brain for you, and you couldn't see what I was drawing, so here I am doing it a second time. So anyway, and it's not your fault. So let's start again. Hello, welcome to my house. You see a cat there? My dog finally woke up, so Toby's going to be awake for round 2. Let's draw a brain. So we are going to be working through that. So a couple things I did want to mention before we get too far. Yesterday you were responsible for picking up a big sheet of paper, which I am going to help you draw this. This time you'll be able to see it, even though I made a really great video and you couldn't see it before. It's fine. Anyway, so you need one of these for today. You also need crayons or colored pencils because we are going to color code it. You also picked up for this week your Parts of the Brain study guide. On your Parts of the Brain study guide, it says mnemonic device. Mnemonic device is a way to help you remember something. So it's like a little saying or something that helps trigger a memory. The biggest problem with this week is there's just so much content and so many parts of the brain, which we're going to do a bunch today, and then we're going to add a ton more when we get going on this tomorrow. So there's a ton of parts here. There's a ton of parts here. It's just hard to keep them separate. So with that being said, that's why we're doing mnemonic devices to help us remember what parts of the brain. Oh, there's a cat. What parts of the brain are doing what. So that's what that mnemonic device thing means. And I'll be pointing them out as I go, and I'll be saying this is the mnemonic device you should be using to remember this, of course. This is your focus. This focus looks more like your traditional study guides, I'm aware. There are a couple of questions here on the back. Only in this very back section where you have like actual questions is what I'm looking for full sentences. Everything else can just be phrases or whatever you need. With that being said, when you get to your focus questions, or if you don't have your focus or study guide for this week, on plantlectures.com, I have all of the worksheets for this week, and I've already posted next week's worksheets. So let's talk about what's probably going to be happening over the next couple of days. So obviously we have today off, we have tomorrow off, which I'm pretty excited about. I've already recorded this video, as I said before, so I was hoping to be taking a nap by noon, but I guess I'm going to keep going here. With that being said, we are going to get hit by the storm on Sunday. Fortunately, when we woke up this morning, we knew it wasn't going to hit us, or theoretically, it's not going to hit us. So we're probably not going to have school on Monday either, which is a good thing and a bad thing. Like I said, I'm a big fan of naps, but that's less time that me and you are together in a really tough week. So with not having school on Monday, probably, nothing's official, of course. Nothing is official. But thinking logically, I don't think we're going to have school. When you come back, hopefully on Tuesday, we're not going to test on Tuesday. We're not going to test on Wednesday. Our first day back will be me and you having a conversation about content, and the second day back is the day you will have a test. We need to keep moving. We need to keep getting things done. So that is why it's so important that you are watching these videos, and I am so thankful that you are doing this. I'm glad I have the opportunity to do this, because sitting around twiddling my thumbs does not work for me. So this weekend, try to get as much ahead as possible. You have this week's assignments and next week's assignments. If you can, get it next week's assignments done. I don't think this storm is going to be catastrophic. I don't think we'll be out more than 3 days. Hopefully. But in case you can get ahead, please do. We're going to do the parts of the brain today. Tomorrow, you also got a diagram that looks like, I have a completed one, but I wanted to see. You also have a diagram that looks like this. Okay. Oh, here's my blank one. You got a diagram that the front looks like this. This is the back. This is what I'm doing tomorrow. This is actually has way more pieces on it than the one we're doing today. However, the one we're doing today gives you a big overview. Tomorrow is a lot more of the specifics, the actual anatomy of the parts of the brain, which is pretty cool. On Monday, I'm going to be recording, or hopefully in front of you, but probably not, showing you a video of corpus callosum, which is really cool. It's one of my favorite videos of the year. It's a guy named Joe. He's really cool. He has this really unique set of issues, which I really love talking about. It's just the weirdest thing. Anyway, and then hopefully Tuesday we're together, and Wednesday we test. So, all right, let's do parts of the brain. This time, which makes this video different than the one I just finished for 37 minutes, is I'm going to actually show you what my Elmo's doing instead of just talking to you. This is so exciting. So I'm going to hit computer screen right now. See? Perfect. We're already light years ahead of the video I just finished. I'm going to have my Elmo pop up. And you better be recording this. And it is, ladies and gentlemen. You can see my paper and my cell phone. Fantastic. All right. So, as you know, I am on my desk. You also probably want to see my little man. Oop, that's a lot of me. My little man is sitting over there. This isn't working really well. He's upside down because I'm using my Elmo. He's over there, hanging out, living life. He came over and got involved during my AP World one, so maybe he'll get involved for this one. So, if, as you saw, Duncan just came in real hot as we were doing this earlier. She'll be wandering around. She likes being involved in everything, so you'll see her around. Make sure you have your crayons out and about. As I told you on, Wednesday? Yeah, Wednesday, because today's Thursday. You can fold your piece of paper in half. Fold it in half. Now, at the very bottom of your sides, label one left. Label one right. This is going to be a very big deal because your brain has a left and a right side. So, with that being said, you are going to do the very best you can. You are going to draw a brain or a head in the center of your page. Do not fill up the whole page because we're going to be writing and drawing around the brain. So look at mine first before you start yours. Oh, this is terrible. There's his lips, neck. There's the back of his head. There we go. All right. So as you can see, I have plenty of room to draw and write around. Okay. So on the right side, just to the left, now I'm doing the right, I'm going to draw another head. However, this head is going to be facing the other direction. Try to make your faces look like they belong to the same person, I guess. And they don't. Look at how weird their necks are. Okay, cool. These are not the same people, but do the best you can. It's really not a big deal. So, we've of course labeled our brains left and right. Yours can't be worse than mine. It's really bad. So, what we're going to do is we're just going to start labeling our basics. Okay, so I'm going to start on the right-hand side. You need to start on the right-hand side. We will deal with the left here in a second. I cannot stress how important it is that you, oh, there's a cat. Duncan, move, move. How important it is that you're following along with the left and the right sides. All right, so here we go. So this is going to be your frontal lobe. Now your frontal lobe is located in the front of your brain. How tricky. Then you're going to have right behind it your motor cortex. Your motor cortex is located technically inside your frontal lobe as well. So both of these are technically in your frontal lobe, but it's important that you understand they're kind of a little bit separate. So when we talk about the frontal lobe, we call it the newest part of the brain. Part of the brain. the reason why we call it the newest part of your brain is that when our ancestors, monkeys, okay, our animal ancestors, were evolving, we've come from monkeys and here we are to humans who have like things like the internet and like crazy buildings and all that cool stuff. So when we talk about your brain specifically tomorrow, the lower part of your brain is dealing with all of your life sustaining functions. So your heartbeat, your breathing, and all that stuff is going to be down in the lower parts of your brain, which is why people are really protective of their spinal cords, of course. You obviously don't want to be paralyzed, but you can kill yourself if you hit this lower part of your brain, and that's because that's where all of your life-sustaining activities are. So as we've evolved, our brain's gotten bigger, which means we're able to feel things, do things, hear things better, as well as develop intellectually. So your frontal lobe is what makes everything about a human, whatever makes you human, happen. So it's all of your higher mental processes. Okay, so everything that makes us human is done in your frontal lobe. Everything that makes us human. So, for instance, you just saw my cat Duncan. My cat Duncan has a very, very, very small frontal lobe. Duncan is not very bright. My dog Toby has a slightly bigger frontal lobe, but he's also not very bright. The larger the frontal lobe, the more humanistic, the more human thoughts, the more advanced thoughts. Hence why humans are the most advanced animals on this planet, because we have the largest frontal lobe. So what can we do, and what does the frontal lobe control? First of all, decision making. Okay, we're able to sit back and wait and strategize and do everything we need to. Sorry, that was cat coming in. Making plans is another major thing that we can do that animals can't. And then, of course, production of speech. Now, no matter how long I work with my cat is never ever going to be able to speak to me. The reason why she won't be able to speak to me is because her frontal lobe is too small. The larger your frontal lobe, the more ability you have to speak. Frontal lobe, everything that makes us human, speaking. Okay? So, your frontal lobe technically also includes your motor cortex. Now, your motor cortex, and I'm going to write this way over here. Your motor cortex receives info from your somatosensory cortex and responds with efferent parentheses motor neurons to your peripheral nervous system. Okay, so your motor cortex is going to receive information. So I'm going to explain this a little bit further, but once I create the somatosensory, which we've already started talking about. So your somatosensory is located right here. And that is actually technically a part of your parietal lobe. So your parietal lobe is dealing with all of your skin. It's all of your sensations. Technically, all of your sensations are processed in your somatosensory cortex. Okay, so your somatosensory cortex is actually in your parietal lobe, and your somatosensory cortex receives info from the peripheral nervous system, parentheses afferent. Okay, so, sorry. There's no one here yelling at me that you can't see it, so sorry. So, going back, looking at it this way, Okay, so here's our brain. Okay, all of your sensory neurons coming from your peripheral nervous system. So all of your sensory neurons are traveling up your sensory pathway, and that sensory pathway brings you to your somatosensory cortex. Once it's in your somatosensory cortex, your inner neurons are then processing that information and figuring out what exactly is happening. So, going back to the example we've used 1,000 times in class. So, if I get kicked in the shins, that message is being sent all the way through. So I get kicked in the shins. All of my sensory neurons are like, holy crap, we just got kicked in the shins. Let's tell the brain. So those sensory neurons are firing. It travels up your sensory pathway all the way up to your somatosensory cortex. Once it gets to your somatosensory cortex, your sensory neurons are like, holy crap, somatosensory cortex, we just got kicked in the shins. What the hell? So your inner neurons in the somatosensory cortex are like, oh my God, no way, we got kicked in the shins. Let's tell the motor cortex. So the somatosensory cortex shares that information once it's processed with the motor cortex. The motor cortex is like, oh my God, somatosensory cortex, what's happening? And the motor cortex is like the somatosensory response, we just got kicked in the shins. Your motor cortex, all the inner neurons there are like, oh hell no, let's punch them. So your motor cortex then sends efferent neurons down your motor pathway, down your arm to your fist, and punches it in the face. There you go. So all of your information is processed in your somatosensory cortex. Your inner neurons there are processing that information. Once it's been processed in your somatosensory cortex, those inner neurons share it with your motor cortex, and the motor cortex sends efferent neurons down your motor pathway to your muscles to respond. Isn't it nice when everything kind of starts connecting? Okay, so your parietal lobe as a whole processes information from your skin. So your skin temperature and body position. So anything that has to deal with any types of sensation and stuff like that are all going to be done in your parietal lobe. Okay? So your parietal lobe is located right here. Okay? Then you have, in the back of your head, you have a place called the occipital lobe. Occipital lobe is where your visual cortex is located. Okay? Have you ever hit your head hard enough that you saw stars? Okay, if you've ever fall back in your head and you're just like, you see like your vision kind of flirts in and out for a second, you're like, oh my God. Okay, that's because you hit your occipital lobe or you hit your visual cortex and all of a sudden you kind of shorted out your visual cortex for a second. It's kind of scary, but pretty much everyone's done it at least once. And then you have your final lobe, which is your temporal lobe. Now your temporal lobe holds your auditory cortex. Auditory cortex is where we hear things. You'll notice your auditory cortex, if we decided to put an ear, the ear would be right there. The auditory cortex is right behind your ear, which makes a lot of sense. Why would we send this information somewhere else? So your temporal lobe holds onto your auditory cortex and it processes everything you hear. So what we're going to do now is we're going to quickly decipher what is the difference between a cortex and a lobe. So a cortex is an area of sensation processing. So an area of sensation processing. So in your auditory cortex, we're processing auditory information. In your visual cortex, we're processing visual information. In your somatosensory cortex, we're processing all of your sensations. In your motor cortex, we're processing all of your afferent neurons in order to send efferent neurons. There you go. So that's your cortex. Your lobes, which we're going to color coordinate here in a second, are areas in the brain where info is being processed. So what that means is areas where information is being processed areas, everything happens in specific lobes. So all of your information about that makes you human is going to be happening in your frontal lobe. Now keep in mind, your motor cortex is part of your frontal lobe, so I'm going to color my frontal lobe blue. Your motor cortex happens to be a part of your frontal lobe, so we're going to color that in. Now remember, I'm still on my right side. I'm going to do my left here in a couple minutes, and we're going to use these same colors. So don't put them back in the box. We're going to be using these colors again. So your frontal lobe holds your motor cortex. Think about it. If this is what makes us human, your frontal lobe, I've never seen a monkey be able to text. I've never seen a monkey be able to type. So anything of like your fine motor movements have to be done by your frontal lobe, okay? Because things we can do, animals can't. It has to be done by frontal lobe. So your parietal lobe, which also helms your somatosensory cortex, for me is going to be green. So your parietal lobe is the one that's processing all of your sensations, all of your feelings and stuff like that. It is going to be processing all your afferent neurons. It is in control of where your body is and how it functions. So your parietal lobe also controls your somatosensory cortex. Hopefully you're noticing that every lobe has one cortex. Every lobe has one cortex. Your parietal lobe has the somatosensory cortex, and your frontal lobe has the motor cortex. They are always right next to each other because all the information that comes into your somatosensory cortex, all of your afferent neurons, are going to be shared with your motor cortex. Okay, the motor cortex is going to send your afferent neurons. They have to be located right next to each other because they're in constant communication. Then you have your occipital lobe, and your occipital lobe for me is going to be purple. Your occipital lobe is going to hold your visual cortex, which means everything that you are seeing right now, all the colors, all that are being processed right here in the back of your head, which is why when you fall and hit your head, the back of your head, you see stars. And then finally I have the temporal lobe, which is located behind my ears, which is dealing with your auditory cortex. Okay, now your auditory cortex is listening to all your hearing. You can remember that it's your temporal lobe because tempo of a song dictate is heard by your ears. Temporal lobe. So those are all 4 of your lobes with all 4 of the cortexes that fall into those lobes. Every lobe has a cortex. Okay, every cortex is in one lobe. You need to understand that now because I'm only going to make it more confusing here in a second. So we are going to the left side. We did all of this on the right side. Now we're going to be working on the left side. Now, our person, or mine, really creepy guy, okay, is facing this way. So I'm going to draw my frontal lobe is going this way. Here's my motor cortex. Here is my somatosensory cortex. Here is my parietal lobe. Okay. Here is my occipital lobe, and here is my temporal lobe. So let's label them. So please write it where I am because we're going to add some more information. So here's your frontal lobe. Okay. The frontal lobe also holds your motor cortex. Here is your somatosensory. And here is your parietal lobe, which of course holds your parietal lobe. Then you have your occipital lobe. And then you have, of course, your temporal lobe. Okay, so keep in mind that yes, we are on the left-hand side. You have 2 ears, so that means your temporal lobe, of course, has its auditory cortex on both sides, correct? Your frontal lobe is, yes, we're on the left-hand side of your brain, but it does connect, okay? So your lobes and your cortexes are on both sides. However, the left side of your brain has 2 areas that are only found here. Now, areas are, I'm going to draw a circle right there. This is the first area I'm going to talk about is Broca's area. Okay, now Broca's area is located in your frontal lobe, which makes a lot of sense once we kind of explain what it is. So Broca's area is named after the guy who discovered it, and his name is Broca. So Broca's area deals with language comprehension. Language creation. Sorry, this is my second time doing this today. Clearly haven't figured it out yet. So, Broca's area is located in your frontal lobe and it deals with language creation. What does that mean? That is your physical creation of language. So, that is the coordination of your tongue, your jaw, all of the muscles. Okay, everything is working together in order for me to open my mouth and make the words that are coming out of my mouth. Okay, so when we're speaking, it's not just your jaw just flaps up and down and there's no order, there's no process to it. It's a very, very sharply fine-tuned thing that we've been working on since infancy. So, animals can't talk. No matter how much I try to train my cat Duncan, she is never going to speak to me. That is because her frontal lobe is too small, that she has not developed a Broca's area. Now, if we could enlarge her frontal lobe, maybe she would develop a Broca's area, which means she could make language comprehension, okay? But she doesn't have a large enough frontal lobe, which is why she can't. Humans can make words, sing songs, read a play out loud, all of those different types of things because we have a Broca's area. Now, how do we remember it? Here's your mnemonic device. Broca equals broken jaw. If you can't speak because you have a broken jaw, okay, that's what Broca's area does. Broca, broken jaw. If you can't physically make language, Broca's area is the ability to make language. Broca, broken jaw. Okay, so that's your mnemonic device. Broca's area is dealing with language comprehension, and it has to be in our frontal lobe because animals can't speak. So, your second area that you need to know that's only on the left, which we'll talk about why it's only on the left, is called Wernicke's area. Now, Wernicke's area is located in the temporal lobe. Now, Wernicke's area deals with language comprehension. I'm struggling today. Anyway, so Wernicke's dealing with language comprehension. It's in your temporal lobe, which is where your ears would be. Okay, so it makes sense that right where we're processing sounds is where we're processing language as well. When we talk about language comprehension, it's about understanding the words that are coming out of my mouth. So when I tell you to write something down, you immediately start doing it. Hopefully you've noticed I've only spoken in the English language. With that being said, if I started speaking in French, you wouldn't be able to understand it because of the issues of not being able to understand the language. And that's what Wernicke's area does. It takes all these sounds and then allows you to hear them and process the meaning behind the words. And that's what Wernicke's area does. So, what is a mnemonic device for it? Wernicke, what? What? Anytime you hear something that you don't understand, you say, what? Okay? Because what helps you deal with language comprehension? Wernicke, what? Language comprehension. Okay? So Wernicke's area is located in your temporal lobe because that is where we hear things. Obviously, it's all being processed by our auditory cortex. So if we're talking about learning and hearing and understanding things, then it makes sense it's there. So just to make sure we're clear, what are areas? Areas are parts of the brain not specifically identified, but assumed to be occurring there. So what that means is we don't actually know where in your frontal lobe Broca's area is happening. Like, we know exactly where your motor cortex is. We know exactly where your somatosensory cortex is. We know exactly where your hypothalamus is, where your amygdala is, and all that stuff. But we don't know exactly where your Broca's area is occurring. That's why we call it an area, and it's not a specific part of your brain. So we know that our language creation is being held and is being done in your frontal lobe, but we don't know exactly where. We know that language comprehension is happening in your Wernicke's area. We just don't know where, and that's what makes an area an area. So let's color in our lobes using the same colors we did last time. Remember, your motor cortex happens to be in your frontal lobe. So don't forget to color it blue like I'm doing, or whatever color you decide to use. Don't color in your Broca's area, but please know your Broca's area is located in your frontal lobe. It has to be located in your frontal lobe because animals can't do it. If animals can do it, it's not in your frontal lobe. If it's what makes humans humans, then it has to be in your frontal lobe. So blue frontal lobe includes your motor cortex. Okay? For me, my parietal lobe is green, so I'm going to color in my parietal lobe right now, green. Remember, your somatosensory cortex is here. Now, as you see that every single lobe has a cortex, but not every cortex has an area. Please make sure you're making that decipher. You're figuring that out. So every lobe has a cortex, not every lobe has an area. Only two of them do, and that's your temporal and, of course, your frontal lobe. Okay, for me, my occipital lobe is going to be purple. Okay, your occipital lobe, my occipital lobe is purple, and of course my temporal lobe is going to be orange. And my temporal lobe is going to have Wernicke's area. Wernicke what? Language comprehension, because you only say the word what when you don't understand something. So it has to be Wernicke's area. What? Language comprehension. So your temporal lobe is going to have your Wernicke's area. I'm just going to color in two different colors just to make them stick out. My Wernicke's area, I'm going to color pink. Why not? Okay, and I'm just going to underline it here, pink. And my Broca's area, Broca, broken jaw. If I had a broken jaw, I wouldn't be able to speak and create words. So Broca, broken jaw is going to be right here. So you will notice that we only put Broca's area and Wernicke's area on the left side of your brain. That is because although we have lobes and cortexes on both sides of the brain, only the left side of your brain deals with language. Now, you have two hemispheres of your brain. If you've ever seen a brain, it looks like it has a line dividing it down the top of it, correct? Okay, that is where the hemispheres separate. Okay, now we have something that connects them, which we'll get to in a second, but you have a left and a right hemisphere. Both of these hemispheres do different things. Your brain is all about streamlining and being as effective as possible without wasting time. So it makes sense that it assigns certain responsibilities to one side and other responsibilities to the other side. Now we're going to talk, we know that they connect, but certain things happen on only certain sides. So to help you remember what happens on what side, we write everything as left hemisphere deals with language, linear, logic. Okay? If it starts with an L, it has to be happening on the left side of the brain. Isn't that nice? You're welcome. That's a mnemonic device for you. So, language. What do we mean by language? It is the creation and comprehension of language. So anytime that you're hearing something or saying something, it's your left side of the brain that's doing it. Isn't that cool? That's so cool. Linear is your thought progressions. Okay? Your thought progressions are when, okay? Your thought progressions are, if I get out of bed right now, I have to brush my teeth, wash my face, I have to do this, I have to do this, I have to do that. That's linear, okay? So language is talking, hearing things, processing information. Linear is all your thought progressions. And then, of course, you have logic, and that is going to be your reasoning skills. Your reasoning skills, the easiest way to refer to it is like your math skills, okay? If you're able to say, well, that can't happen because of this, this, and this, then you're a logical person, and that's going to be your left side of the hemisphere. Now, your left, language, linear, logic, okay, we are more complicated than these three things, so that's why we have a right hemisphere. Your right hemisphere is dealing with creativity. Okay, it's creativity, it's feelings, it's melody, and it's spatial awareness. Okay, so left, language, linear, logic, right hemisphere is everything else. When in doubt, if it is not language, linear, and logic, it has to be right hemisphere. So creativity, those are your artists. Okay, those are people who think outside the box. These are like, these are everyone who is not Samantha Bennett. Feelings is both understanding your own and others. Okay, and then your melody is the ability to understand music and hear differences. Okay? And then you have spatial awareness, is that's control over your body's movements. Okay? So hopefully as you're looking at this list between left and right hemispheres, hopefully you're seeing that, yeah, I'm really good at this and this, but I'm also very logical. So what am I? Am I left-sided or right-sided? Hopefully you see strengths on both sides because we're complex people here. Okay? Only 10% of the population totally identify themselves on one side of the brain. If you've ever watched The Big Bang Theory, Sheldon Cooper is completely left side of the brain. Completely left side of the brain. Okay? Your right hemisphere, a good example for that would be like a Monet, a Van Gogh, any of your super, super talented artists. You know what? I'm going to throw a little Kanye in there. Kanye. I'm going to throw a little bit of him. Yes, he has the language because he's a rapper and stuff like that, but that man is so far out of the box. Okay, I'm going to throw him in there as well. So we have very few people who identify themselves in very specific, only 10% of the population find themselves as a completely left or right brain. Obviously, they still require both, but 90% of us pull, like, I have a strength here, I have a strength here, and that's because our brains talk to each other. Our hemispheres speak to each other. They're connected. And what we call this connectivity, it's actually like a tendon. It's a fibrous tendon that connects our left hemisphere to the right hemisphere. And it's called your corpus callosum. Your corpus callosum connects the left and right hemisphere. And allows there to be an awareness of the other hemispheres activities. So, yes, we have a left hemisphere and a right hemisphere. And yes, you do need to know that the left is in charge of language, linear logic, and the right is in control of your creativity, your feelings, your melody, and your spatial awareness. Yes, but you need to understand that we have the corpus callosum, which allows our left and our right hemispheres to be in constant communication with each other. So when the right brain is doing something, the left brain knows about it. When the left brain is doing something, your right brain knows it. It allows for constant communication so your brain works together. Now, I'm going to show you a video clip on Monday where we have a guy who gets his corpus callosum cut. The doctors go in and cut it. And his left side of the brain does not talk to his right side of the brain. And things get stuck in the left hemisphere because they can't go to the right hemisphere. It's the trippiest thing you've ever seen, and I absolutely love it. His name's Joe. He has an awesome sense of fashion. You're going to see he wears the most amazing... Oh, cat coming. He wears the most amazing sweater in his video. It's fantastic, and I enjoy it so much. And the fact that he doesn't have a corpus callosum is just wild. They cut it. It's just crazy. So, yes, you need to know that your left hemisphere deals with language, linear logic, and you need to know that your right deals with creativity, feelings, melody, and spatial awareness. But we have the corpus callosum, which connects. 3 big things you have to know from this video. You need to know that you have 4 lobes of the brain, and each of the lobes have 4 cortexes. You need to be able to say the lobe and the cortex that is in that lobe. You also need to be able to say what are the 2 areas in the brain and what lobe they're in. So you need to know the 3 big things you need to know. What are the 4 lobes and what do they do? What are the 4 cortexes? What do they do and what lobe they're in? And you need to know what are the 2 areas and what lobe they're in. I guess there's 4 things you need to know. And what does the left hemisphere and the right hemisphere of your brain do? All right, guys, that's it for today. It's not as good as my first video, which was an epic fail, if you're me. Hence why I had to do it a second time, so that's cool. But hopefully you have a great brain and you're happy with it. Hopefully it's nice and colored like mine is. And yeah, so I hope you have a great rest of your day. Sorry about the cats. The dog's still sleeping on his couch. And I will see you tomorrow. We are doing this, which is really hard. Really hard. Cat. This is what we're doing tomorrow. We're dealing with all the parts of the brain. So today we did cortexes, lobes, and we did areas. Tomorrow we do the actual parts of the brain. So I hope you have couch in your future. I hope you have a nap, because I do. And I will see you tomorrow. And I'm doing this on the first time, not the second. So thank you again for doing what you need to be doing. I will be here tomorrow recording a video for you. I'm not going to be here Saturday or Sunday recording a video for you. I think that makes a lot of sense. I will be here on Monday because I'm pretty sure we're not going to have school on Monday. And hopefully we'll be together on Tuesday so we can test on Wednesday and then everything works out. Won't that be wonderful? Anyway, I hope you have a good day. And I'll see you tomorrow. I'm still working on the live feed thing. Haven't forgotten about you. I just don't think I'm smart enough. And Duncan wanted to say goodbye. Anyway, have a good day. Ugh, thanks, Duncan.